The sun baked the quiet streets of the neighborhood, turning the asphalt soft and making the air shimmer. It was the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors, where kids played until the streetlights flickered on. But for the past few months, a different kind of resident had taken over, changing the feel of those 3 blocks entirely. They were not welcome neighbors. They were a pack of 3 stray dogs, and they ruled the area with a nervous, snapping kind of authority. The leader was a big dog, a mix of something like a German shepherd. He was not a healthy, proud animal. You could see his history written on his body. A long, pale scar cut through the fur near his shoulder, and one of his ears had a V-shaped notch missing, as if from an old fight. His coat, which might have been a rich tan and black, was matted and dull with dust. People started calling him Rex, not with affection, but because the name sounded mean and fitting. He moved with a slow, heavy purpose, his eyes constantly watching, judging every movement on his street. Dot right beside him, almost like a shadow, was a thinner, sleek dog. She looked like she had Doberman in her, all tight muscle and long legs, but her ribs showed in a worrying way. She never made a decision on her own. Where Rex went, she followed, her head low, her eyes darting everywhere at once. She was pure nervous energy, a coiled spring. The kids called her Shadow, and it stuck. She would flinch if a car door slammed too loud, or if someone dropped a trash can lid. The 3rd member of the pack was the smallest, a wiry little thing with rough brown fur and 1 white sock on his front paw. He was all noise and jitters. While Rex provided the silent, scary stare and Shadow provided the tense silence, this little dog was the alarm system. He would yap and bark in a high, frantic voice, dancing around the bigger dog's legs. He seemed to survive on pure nerves. Someone said he looked like a bundle of old scraps, and so the name Scraps was born. Together, they were a team, but a sad and desperate one. Their world was the few blocks around Maple Street, and they defended it fiercely. They weren't hunting for fun. They were scavenging to survive. Empty garbage bins were torn over, their contents scattered. The old lady at the corner house started finding her leftover, chicken bones gone from her compost pile. But the real problem was how they treated people. It wasn't that they bit anyone, not at first. It was the fear they created. A mother would be walking her toddler home from the park, and the 3 dogs would appear from behind a hedge. They wouldn't charge, not exactly. They would stand there, blocking the sidewalk. Rex would let out a low, rumbling growl from deep in his chest. Shadow would stand stiff-legged, staring, and Scraps would erupt into that crazy, sharp barking. The mother's heart would race. She'd pull her child close, her voice tight as she said, "Don't move, sweetie. Just be still." Then she'd slowly back away, making a wide circle into the street, her eyes never leaving the dogs. The message was clear. This is our space. Stay out. It happened to the mail carrier, who started carrying an air horn. It happened to the joggers, who began choosing different routes. It happened to Mr. Henderson, a kind older man who actually liked animals. He tried one afternoon, speaking softly, holding out a piece of his breakfast sausage. "Here, fellas," he murmured. But Rex had taken a step forward, his lip curling just enough to show a yellowed tooth. Mr. Henderson had sighed, tossed the sausage on the ground, and walked away, his shoulders slumped. The dogs didn't trust kindness. They only understood threat and survival. The neighborhood talk was always about them. People stood on their porches, complaining. "Something has to be done," a woman would say, clutching her robe. "They're a menace. My Buster is terrified to go into our own yard." Buster was a fluffy white dog who peered out from behind her legs. Calls were made to the city's animal control, but the officer who came just shook his head. "If they're not attacking, and we can't catch them, our hands are tied. They're smart. They disappear the moment the truck comes around. So a bad feeling settled over the place. People stopped lingering outside. The cheerful noise of kids playing was replaced by an anxious silence, broken only by the occasional dreaded sound of barking. Doors were closed a little tighter. Curtains were twitched aside to check if the coast was clear. The three dogs, just trying to live, had become the shared villains of the story. Everyone felt like a victim of their scary behavior, and in their hunger and fear, the dogs were victims of everyone's anger and rejection. It was a sad, quiet war, and no one knew how to end it. They were just three lost animals, but on Maple Street, they felt like a huge, terrifying problem with no solution in sight. Asterisk. The tension on Maple Street had been building for weeks, like a pot of water on a slow boil. Everyone was on edge, waiting for something to happen. That something came on a Tuesday afternoon, under a sky so blue and clear, it felt like a cruel joke for such a messy situation. It started with the bread truck. A young delivery driver, new to the route, was whistling as he carried a tray of sandwich rolls to the corner store. He didn't see the three dogs resting in the patch of shade beside the building. His foot scuffed the pavement, and that was all it took. Scraps, the little terrier, shot up like a firecracker, barking his high, piercing bark. Shadow was on her feet in an instant, adding her own deeper, more serious woofs. Rex, the big leader, rose slowly. He didn't bark. He just stared, his body a solid, blocking shape between the driver and his truck. The driver froze, the tray of bread held out in front of him like a flimsy shield. "Hey now," he said, his voice shaky. "Good dogs, easy." But the word, good, felt wrong in the air. These weren't good dogs. They were scared, cornered strays, and he was in their space. He tried to take a slow step backward toward his open van door. The movement was a mistake. Rex took a single step forward. A low, terrible rumble came from his chest, a sound you felt more than heard. The driver's courage vanished. He dropped the tray. The bread rolls went bouncing and rolling across the sidewalk. He scrambled into his van, slamming the door shut with a bang that echoed down the street. Safe inside, his fear turned to frustration. He leaned on the horn. One long, blaring note that shattered the afternoon quiet. Windows opened up and down the street. Faces appeared, drawn by the noise. Inside the dogs, the horn did something terrible. It pushed their fear into a frenzy. The loud, aggressive sound confirmed their worst belief. The world was a dangerous, attacking place. Rex started to bark now, a loud, sharp sound. He and Shadow began circling the van, their nails clicking on the pavement. Scraps raced around in dizzy circles, arcing nonstop at the big, noisy metal box that had invaded their street. From his house at number 42, the older man everyone called Mr. Henderson came out. He was tired of being scared in his own neighborhood. He grabbed the rake, leaning by his porch. He wasn't a violent man, but he wanted to shoo them away, to break up the scary scene. "Get out of here," he shouted, waving the rake in the air. "Go on, Scram." He marched toward the commotion, the plastic tines of the rake swishing through the air. To the dogs, this was the ultimate threat. A human was coming at them with a weapon. Rex turned from the van, his focus entirely on this new danger. He lunged, not to bite Mr. Henderson, but to bite the threat itself. His teeth closed on the end of the rake. With a loud crack, Mr. Henderson yelped in surprise and pulled the rake back. Rex held on for a second, growling fiercely before letting go. Now it was a full-blown standoff. The driver was honking the horn in short, angry bursts. Mr. Henderson was standing his ground, breathing heavily, the rake held out shakily. The three dogs were a snarling, barking, spinning wheel of noise and panic. It was chaos, loud and frightening. It was the explosion everyone had been waiting for. On her porch across the street, a little girl watched. She had been watching the dogs for a long time, from a distance. While the other kids ran inside, she would sit on her steps and just look. She noticed things the adults, in their anger, did not. She saw how Scraps would sometimes stop barking to sniff a dandelion growing through the crack in the pavement. She saw how Shadow's tail would give the tiniest, most hopeful wag when a bird sang, before she caught herself and tucked it between her legs again. She saw the way Rex always put himself slightly in front of the other two, how he was always looking, always watching out for them. He wasn't just mean. He was busy. He was in charge. As she watched the scary scene with the van and the rake, she didn't see monsters. She saw something else. She saw the driver, red-faced and scared. She saw Mr. Henderson, his kindness all used up, replaced by frustration. And she saw the dogs Rex's ears were flat back, not in anger, but in pure fear. Shadow was trembling as she barked. Scraps looked like he was about to vibrate out of his own fur. Her mother called from the doorway, her voice tight. "Get inside. Right now. It's dangerous." But the girl didn't move. She felt a deep, sad feeling in her chest. Everyone was yelling, and no one was listening. The dogs were talking in the only way they knew, how with barks and growl, saying, "We are scared, we are scared, we are scared." And the people were answering back in the only way they knew how, with horns and rakes and shouts saying, "We are scared. We are scared, we are scared." It was all just different kinds of shouting, and shouting never solved anything. Someone had to stop shouting. Someone had to just listen. As the noise from the street peaked the honking, the yelling, the snarling, a very quiet idea formed in the little girl's mind. It wasn't a grand plan. It was a simple, clear thought. She looked at the scared little dog, Scraps, who looked the most hungry and the most confused. She thought about what you do when someone is shouting. You don't shout back. You speak softly. You offer a way out. She slowly stood up. Her heart was beating fast in her own chest, a little drum of fear. But the feeling in her heart was stronger than the fear. It was a feeling of understanding, a feeling that this whole war was just a giant, sad mistake. She took a step down off the porch. Behind her, her mother's voice came again, sharper. "What are you doing? Stop." But the girl kept walking, one small, slow step at a time, off the porch and onto the sidewalk. She wasn't looking at the big, scary dog Rex. She was looking at the little, nervous one. She was going to do what no one else had tried to do. She was going to say hello. The world seemed to shrink to the 20 feet of cracked sidewalk between the little girl and the dogs. All the noise, the honking, Mr. Henderson's angry shouts, her mother's frightened call from the porch faded into a dull buzz in her ears. Her whole world was the three animals in front of her, and the hammering of her own heart. She moved slowly, not like someone trying to sneak, but like someone moving through deep water. Every instinct in her body, the same instinct that made everyone else run, was telling her to stop. But she kept her eyes on Scraps, the little terrier. He was the one who looked the most like a question mark, all nervous energy and confusion. She knew you weren't supposed to stare a scared dog in the eye. Her grandpa had told her that once, about a nervous farm dog. "It's like a challenge," he'd said. "You look at their shoulder or the ground near them. You let them know you're not there to fight." So she looked at Scraps's twitchy front paws, dancing on the hot pavement. When she was about halfway, she stopped. This felt like the right distance. Close enough to be noticed, but far enough to not be a threat. She could see them so clearly now. She saw the dust matted in Rex's fur, the old scar on his shoulder. She saw how Shadow's sleek coat was dull, and how her ribs moved in and out too fast. She saw the wild, white-rimmed look in Scraps' eyes. Slowly, careful not to make any sudden moves, she sank down into a crouch. She made herself small, not a tall, looming figure, but just a little person sitting on the ground. The concrete was warm through her pants. The dogs had fallen silent. The honking from the van had stopped. Mr. Henderson was just standing there, the rake hanging loosely at his side, his mouth slightly open. The whole street was holding its breath. Rex was staring at her, his head low, every muscle in his body tight as a coiled spring. A low sound, not quite a growl, rumbled in his throat. It was a warning. A final, clear warning. The little girl heard it, and a shiver went down her spine. But she didn't run. She didn't look up at him. She kept her focus on the space between her and the little dog. She remembered the lunchbox. It was a small, pink plastic box with a sticker of a rainbow on it, lying where she'd left it by the porch step after school. But that was too far away. Then she remembered the half-eaten package of peanut butter crackers in the pocket of her hoodie. She had put them there after lunch. With movements that were slow and deliberate, she put her hand into her pocket. Rex's growl deepened for a second. She froze until the sound died down, then slowly pulled out the crinkly package. The sound of the plastic made Scraps' ears prick forward. She could see his nose twitching. She peeled the package open with the same slow care. The smell of peanut butter and crackers wafted out. Scraps took a tiny, hesitant step forward. Shadow, behind him, let out a single soft whine. The girl didn't throw the food at them. She didn't hold it out in her hand, which might make her hand seem like a target. Instead, she took one cracker and broke it in half. She gently tossed one half so that it landed on the sidewalk with a tiny tap, about 3 feet in front of her. It was an offering, an invitation. For a long moment, nothing happened. The cracker sat there on the concrete. Rex watched her. Shadow watched the cracker. Scraps looked from the cracker to the girl, to Rex, and back to the cracker. His hunger was at war with his fear. Finally, his hunger won. He darted forward in a quick, jerky movement, snatched the cracker piece, and scrambled back to his spot behind Rex's front legs. He wolfed it down in one gulp. The girl didn't move. She didn't smile or speak. She just waited. She broke the other half of the cracker. This time, she tossed it a tiny bit closer, 2 feet away. Again, the dart, the grab, the retreat. But this time, Scraps didn't run all the way back. He stood a foot closer, licking his lips, his eyes fixed on her hands. The girl could feel the attention of the whole street on her back. She could hear a soft, whispered argument from her porch. But she blocked it out. This was just between her and them now. She took out another whole cracker. This time she didn't toss it. She placed it carefully on the palm of her hand, and then she laid her hand, palm up, flat on the ground in front of her knees. She looked down at the sidewalk near her hand, not at the dogs. This was the biggest risk. This meant trust, Scraps whimpered. He took a step, then another. Rex made a short huff sound, but it didn't sound as angry as before. It sounded more like a watchful parent. Scraps inched closer, his body low to the ground. He stretched his neck out, his nose quivering. His warm, wet breath tickled the girl's fingers. Then, with a movement so fast it was a blur, he gently took the cracker from her palm. His teeth never touched her skin. He didn't run away this time. He sat down, right there, 2 feet from her, and chewed the cracker happily, his tail giving a few small, hesitant thumps against the ground. The girl didn't reach out to pet him. She knew that was too much, too soon. She just left her hand on the ground, palm up, empty. It was a signal. *C? No tricks. No harm. *. The change in the air was sudden and shocking. The violent tension, The feeling that something terrible was about to happen just dissolved. It was replaced by a thick, fragile silence, full of a new kind of wonder. The standoff was over. The war hadn't been won by a louder shout or a bigger weapon. It had been ended by a quiet cracker and a small, brave hand held open in peace. On the sidewalk, a little girl sat with a nervous dog, tentatively wagging its tail near her. Behind him, the two bigger dogs watched, their bodies no longer rigid with threat, but with a wary, exhausted curiosity. The shocking thing wasn't a magic trick. It was the simple, powerful proof that everyone had been wrong. These dogs weren't mindless monsters. They were just very, very hungry and very, very afraid. And they were waiting for someone to finally see it. The silence that settled over Maple Street was heavier than the noise had been. It was a silence of held breath, of disbelief. From his van, the delivery driver just stared, his hands frozen on the steering wheel. Mr. Henderson slowly lowered his rake until the tip rested on the ground. On her porch, the little girl's mother had her hands pressed over her mouth, her eyes wide. The little girl, still in her crouch, stayed perfectly still. Scraps finished the cracker and looked at her empty hand, then up at her face. His tail gave another uncertain thump. She slowly turned her hand over and placed it back in her lap. She didn't try to touch him. She just started talking, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper. "Just for the dogs. That's all I have," she murmured. "But maybe tomorrow I can bring more." She stood up then, moving as slowly as she had when she approached. Scraps skittered back a few steps, but he didn't bark. He just watched her. Rex let out a long, slow sigh, a huge release of air that seemed to deflate his whole fierce posture. He turned his massive head and looked at Shadow. Then, without a sound, the three of them turned and trotted away, disappearing down the side alley they used as their pathway. The street was empty again, but it was a different street dot. The girl walked back to her porch. Her legs felt a little shaky now that it was over. Her mother swooped down, pulling her into a tight hug that was half frightened, half proud. "You must never, ever do that again," her mother whispered into her hair, her voice trembling. But the girl just nodded, her mind already somewhere else. The news traveled through the neighborhood faster than the gossip about the dogs ever had. It wasn't delivered with angry shouts from porches this time. It was shared in hushed, amazed tones over garden fences and in whispered phone calls. Asterisk, did you see it? The little girl from the blue house. She just walked right up. She fed them. They took it. Asterisk, the next afternoon, a small group of neighbors gathered, discreetly, behind curtains and screen doors. They watched as the girl came out at the same time. She had her little pink lunchbox. She walked to the same spot on the sidewalk, sat down, and opened it. She had brought more today. Some leftover chicken pieces her mother had cut up, and a few dog biscuits she'd bought with her own pocket money at the corner store. She didn't have to wait long. The three dogs appeared at the mouth of the alley. They didn't rush. They walked slowly, with a new kind of caution. Rex hung back, a watchful guardian. But Scraps, encouraged by yesterday's success, came forward more quickly. Shadow followed just a step behind him. This became the new routine. Every day after school, the girl would sit on the sidewalk, and every day the dogs would come. The neighborhood watched the slow, miraculous change. They saw Scraps grow bold enough to eat from her hand every time, his tail now wagging in steady, happy circles. They saw Shadow, the sleek, nervous one, begin to change. One day, after eating a piece of chicken tossed gently to her, she didn't immediately retreat. She took a step closer, then another, and then she slowly, ever so slowly, lowered her head and nudged the girl's knee with her wet nose. It was a tiny touch, a massive act of trust. The girl didn't jerk her hand up to pet her. She just let her nose rest there for a second and whispered, "You're a good girl." But Rex, the leader, was the holdout. He would stand back, always alert, always making sure the situation was safe for his little family. He accepted food, but only if the girl tossed it a respectful distance toward him. He would never come close. One of the neighbors watching this daily ritual was the older woman who lived in the last house on the street. She had a kind face and had always left bowls of water out on her back step, even during the worst of the trouble. She watched Rex more closely than anyone. There was something about him that seemed familiar. One sunny afternoon, as Rex stood in his usual guard post, the breeze ruffled his thick neck fur. For a moment it parted, and the woman saw something. A flash of faded blue and a glint of metal buried deep in the matted hair. She squinted. It was an old, worn collar. A memory clicked into place. She hurried inside and made a phone call to a friend who used to live a few blocks over. The conversation was full of, "Do you remember?" and "Whatever happened to?" When she hung up, she had tears in her eyes. She walked out onto her porch and called softly to the girl's mother, who was watching from her own steps. The two women talked in low voices for a long time. Later, the mother sat her daughter down. "We found out something about Rex," she said gently. "That big dog. A long time ago, he belonged to an old man who lived in the big house on the corner of Elm. He loved that dog very much. The man got very sick, and then he passed away. His family came from far away to deal with the house. They took the man, but they left the dog. They just left him." The little girl felt a deep ache in her heart. She understood now. Rex hadn't been born a wild, mean street dog. He had been someone's beloved friend. He had watched his person disappear forever. Then, alone and heartbroken, he had found two other lost souls, Shadow and Scraps, and had done the only thing he knew how to do. He had protected them. Every person who came near was a threat to take away what little family he had left. Every shout, every broom, every honking horn was just more proof that the world was a dangerous place for a dog with no home. He wasn't a monster. He was a guardian. A lost, scared, and incredibly loyal guardian. That evening, when the girl went out with the food, she looked at Rex differently. She saw the sadness in his wise, tired eyes. She tossed him his chicken piece, and for the first time, she spoke directly to him. "You're a good protector," she whispered. "You kept them safe. But you can rest now." Rex caught the food, his eyes never leaving hers. For the first time, his tail moved. Just once. A single slow sweep from side to side. It wasn't a happy wag. It was an acknowledgement. It was as if, after all these long, hard months, someone had finally spoken his language. Someone had finally understood his story. The secret was out, and it changed everything for everyone. The truth about Rex moved through the neighborhood like a warm wind, melting the last of the icy fear. People didn't see a scary pack anymore. They saw a family. They saw a loyal dog who had lost everything, trying his best with what he had left. The story of the old man made folks look at their own lives, their own pets, and feel a deep pang of understanding. Anger is a simple thing, but sadness is complicated. An understanding that sadness changes everything. A meeting was called, not by official people, but by neighbors on front porches. The little girl and her mother were right in the middle of it. The girl's quiet bravery had shown the way, and now the adults knew they had to finish what she started. They couldn't just keep feeding the dogs on the street forever. Winter would come. The dogs needed real safety, real homes. The problem was how to get them that safety without destroying the fragile trust the girl had built. Scaring them into a truck was no longer an option. They had to be asked. The girl's mother made the call. She found a local animal rescue group, the kind run by volunteers who genuinely loved animals. She explained the whole story, the pack, the fear, the little girl, the old collar, all of it. The woman on the phone listened, and her voice got soft. "We can help," she said, "but we have to do it on their terms. We'll bring a quiet van. No loud noises. And the little girl, she needs to be there. She's the bridge." The day the rescue volunteers came, the street felt different. It wasn't a tense, watching silence. It was a hopeful, waiting quiet. The girl sat in her usual spot, her heart beating fast. This was the big test. She had explained it to the dogs in her soft whispers all week. "Nice people are coming," she'd tell them while they ate. "They want to help you find a soft bed." A plain, white van pulled up, and 2 women got out. They didn't wear uniforms. They moved slowly and spoke in calm, low voices. They brought out not scary poles or nets, but a simple leash and a folded-up metal crate they called a kennel. They set it on the sidewalk with its door wide open. Making a little den, the dogs came, as they always did. Scraps trotted up happily for his treat. Shadow followed close behind. Rex hung back, watching the new people with a careful, serious gaze. But he didn't growl. He saw his little friend sitting there, calm and safe, and it seemed to settle him. One of the rescue women crouched down near the girl. "Let's start with the little one," she whispered. "He trusts you the most." The girl took a special juicy piece of hot dog the women had brought. She showed it to Scraps, then she walked, slowly, toward the open door of the kennel. She placed the treat just inside. Scraps didn't even hesitate. He scampered right in after it, tail wagging. The moment he was fully inside, the rescue woman gently, quietly closed the door. Scraps looked up, a bit surprised, but he was still chewing his hot dog. He was safe. Shadow was next. She was more nervous, sensing the change. The girl sat by the kennel door and called her softly. It took a few minutes and a few more treats, but Shadow's desire to be near her young friend was stronger than her fear. She slunk inside, and the door clicked shut. Now it was just Rex and the girl on the sidewalk. The big dog looked at the van, at the closed kennel holding his friends, and then at the girl. You could see the worry in his eyes. The girl walked up to him, closer than she had ever dared. She didn't have a treat. She just looked at him, right in his tired old eyes. "It's okay," she said, her voice clear and sure. "They're safe. Now it's your turn. You can rest." She turned and walked to the second, larger kennel the women had placed nearby. She didn't look back. She just sat down by its opening, patting the ground beside her. For a long moment, Rex stood alone. The guardian. His job was done. The family he had protected was already safe. The weight of all those months, of all that watching and worrying, seemed to lift from his broad shoulders. He walked slowly, not to the food, but to the girl. He walked right past the kennel door and nudged her hand with his great head. Then, with a sigh that seemed to come from the bottom of his paws, he turned and walked into the kennel all by himself, lying down on the soft blanket inside. It was the most peaceful surrender. The volunteer closed the door. The street, for the first time in a very long time, was empty of dogs, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full of possibility. People came out of their houses then, not to complain, but to help. They offered donations to the rescue, towels, old blankets. The story had a new chapter now, and everyone wanted to be part of the happy ending. And the happy ending did come, one dog at a time. Scraps, the nervous little bundle of energy, didn't have to wait long. The young couple who lived in the apartment above the corner store had been watching the whole story unfold from their window. They saw his funny, jittery spirit and fell in love. They adopted him, He now sleeps on a fluffy pillow and has more toys than he knows what to do with. He still barks at delivery trucks, but now it's from the safety of a warm lap. Shadow, the sleek, timid one, went home with the older woman who had noticed the collar. The woman lived alone and had a quiet, gentle house with a sunny garden. It was the perfect place for a shy soul to blossom. Shadow follows her new person from room to room, her tail held high now, a silent, loving shadow in a happy home. And Rex? The rescue group gave him a checkup. He was given a warm bath, and that old, faded blue collar was finally cut away. He was treated for his scars, fed good meals, and given a soft bed in a quiet corner of the shelter. But he wasn't there for long. The girl's family had talked it over every night since the rescue. They had watched their daughter, seen the deep bond that had formed not out of a want for a pet, but out of pure, simple understanding. One weekend, they all drove to the rescue together. When Rex saw the girl walk in, he stood up and his whole back end swayed in a slow, happy wag. He walked over and put his head right under her hand. He had come full circle, from a beloved pet to a lost guardian, back to a dog who could just be loved again. He came home to Maple Street. He sleeps now in a big bed in the corner of the little girl's room. He still watches out the window, but it's a calm watchfulness. His job is different now. His job is just to be. To be safe, to be fed, to be part of a family. The neighborhood is quiet again. But the quiet is different. It's the quiet of a puzzle solved, of a fear overcome. Sometimes the little girl walks down the sidewalk with Rex on a leash, big and calm beside her. People stop and say hello to both of them. The war was over, and peace had come, not because the problem was chased away, but because it was finally, truly understood. And it all started with a quiet cracker, and a heart brave enough to offer it.